Welcome to another episode of the Animal Liberation Hour, where we seek insight from animal rights and liberation activists who inspire us to get active for animals worldwide. I'm Michelle, and for this episode, I sat down with activist Jenny McQueen. Before we get into the episode, I want to announce that Animal Activism Mentorship is now Animal Activism Collective. Mentorship is still at the heart of our organization and will continue as a vital part of what we are now calling AAC. However, our name change better represents the inclusive, collaborative nature of our community. Please visit our website and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and reach out to us if you'd like to sign up to become a mentor or mentee. So now to our guest. For over 2 decades, Jenny McQueen has been an activist who has fiercely advocated for animals. She is a true warrior for justice who never shies away from letting her voice be heard loud and clear. As co-founder of Animal Rights Toronto, she has championed to eliminate the fur industry, shut down animal ag, close slaughterhouses, and much more. I hope you enjoy my conversation with the one and only Jenny McQueen. Hey, Jenny, welcome to the Animal Liberation Hour. It's such a distinct honor and a pleasure to speak with you.
Likewise, Michelle. Thank you so much for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
So let's talk about your past and current efforts and all things animal justice. First, when did you know you had to be an animal rights activist and why? In other words, share a little bit about your activist origin story.
Well, it was quite soon. I became aware of animal issues way back in the 90s, early 90s. And I started reading up on dairy and eggs, and it was such a shock. Why didn't I know about this already? And luckily, an animal rights group was nearby to me in my location, and a letter plopped through the door. That's how it used to work back in those days. So I kind of plucked up courage and I went to join a group. And I was exposed to some of the awful horrors that happen to animals. I think an IFAW, the International Fund for Animal Welfare leaflet, was one of the first that really shook me to the core. It was bear bile farms. And I stayed. I became a member of the animal rights group way back in the 90s. And ever since then, I've been campaigning for animals.
It's amazing how when you're ready for something, right, and you're become aware of something, how it seems to find you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't unsee the horrors. And you wonder, how did I miss this all along?
Right. Because way back, in our education, we had home economics classes. And I saw, the outline of animals, of a cow, and the dotted lines, cutting her up into pieces, and it didn't resonate with me at all. It's really strange. I mean, in a way, we know that we're, when we get to high school, later on in school, we know that it's an animal part in front of us, but somehow a lot of people still don't connect dots.
Yeah, it seems like the clues were always there looking back, and we had little inklings of feelings of it when we were little, when we were young, when we were kids. But we didn't feel empowered in our world or mature enough or have enough agency to speak up about it or to buck the norm in terms of that. And there's so much entrenched conditioning that 98% of the world is part of that. So let's zoom out a bit in terms of the animals. And, a social justice movement is a collective effort to create radical societal change by advocating for equal rights, opportunities, and treatment. Why does the animal rights movement count as a social justice movement? And why do you think the animal rights movement is downplayed? Right? And why do the animals need and deserve their own movement?
Oh my goodness, there's so many issues that you've touched there. Animal rights is absolutely a social justice issue. When we think of all the connections, we've got animals right in the center, suffering, confined, being killed in awful ways. And then outside of that, you've got, what I've seen directly in the conditions that they live in is the worker rights. Workers being expected to actually work inside, not just slaughterhouses. I mean, people generally talk about slaughterhouses. I've been inside pig factories, and you've got urine on the ground, you've got pools of excrement, you've got the dust particles in the air, you've got the fire hazards, darkness, screaming, uh, pandemics potentially starting, and you've got workers. I mean, the pig farm I was in Quebec that we occupied, when we were in court afterwards, we learned that the workers are being flown in from Ghana. And that is a social justice issue. You've got disadvantaged people working in these places being absolutely, taken advantage of. And as well, you've got all the environmental, leaving that aside, you've got all the environmental considerations, deforestation down in the Amazon for cattle grazing, the use of land in so many countries that could instead be used to grow human feed. There are so many connected issues on this. Slaughterhouse workers working in awful conditions, having to kill, sentient beings for their very, um, wages and survival. So many connected issues, which is exactly why, animal rights is a social justice issue. And you say, why is it not given the importance? Well, because people are eating them, and people are given the excuse on the street. Well, I kind of know about all these issues, but oh, I love meat, which is, there's such a disconnect. They don't connect. If they were stood in front of what I've seen, animals in slaughterhouse trucks, begging for their lives, their eyes kind of screaming out at you, then I'm sure it would make a difference to them. But everyone is protected because big ag is spending so much money, and there's laughing animals on packages of meat. There's happy meat. So, society is bombarded with messages that say that animals are treated well, that there's no concern about what's happening. And it's an absolute travesty.
Yeah, it really is. And the scale of it,
Mm.
the scale is just hard to wrap our minds around. And to say it's wrong and it's unfair is really an understatement. And our family and friends are participating in that knowingly and unknowingly. Um, that cognitive dissonance is real, and it's such a systemic normalization that it goes unquestioned. And so that's why, as you give it this sort of larger perspective to it, how we've known in the past when things have been unfair for women, when things have been unfair for LGBTQ plus communities, when things have been unfair for people of color, it's been more obvious and it's been more accepted to fight for those, and the animals have been left off of that train of progress.
Yeah, exactly. And then we see the human suffering. And it's like when we watch a movie, we see terrible things happening to humans, and it brings out the emotion in us, which is why I guess also when we see an animal face, we don't quite connect in the same way. We don't have that same like mirror neuron thing happening that doesn't evoke all these emotions in us, as some of us do. Some of us connect deeply with animals and their suffering, and yet others are just oblivious to it.
Yeah, and it's speciesism. We could stop and define that, in terms of how do you define it? So I sort of just thinking and defining it, of course, quickly as that invisible mindset paradigm that some animals that allows us to discriminate against certain animals and even certain animals within a certain species. So that such that we categorize them and label them as some are for this and some are for that. Some are to love and some are to chop up and eat. So what's your definition of speciesism, or add to that definition, I guess?
Well, it's exactly as you described it. Um, we have our cats and our dogs, and we treat them generally. We treat them well. We love them, and yet we go out to the supermarket and we buy, pretty packaged pig flesh, and there's no difference between any species. They're sentient beings. They feel, they feel pain. They feel emotions. They're not exactly like us. We can't attribute our feelings and emotions to animals, but they're a different species. They deserve our respect. They deserve justice, just like any sentient animal, sentient being does.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be the ideal world, of course, that everyone recognizes that it doesn't matter, our differences don't matter, that we're alike in every way that counts, and you know, it's unnecessary suffering that we're putting them through, not that there's ever necessary suffering, So, yeah. So let's bring as we're starting to bring the animals front and center in our discussion, we're talking about our relationship with animals across time and into the future, and how much there needs to be improvement in that relationship and how much we've betrayed animals. But let's start diving into some of the many forms of animal cruelty. And there are many, many forms and exploitation, starting with the fur industry. If we could see behind closed doors of fur farms, which you may have, give us a glimpse. What would we see? What happens to animals on fur farms? What are the conditions? Paint us a picture. And how do these animals become a quote unquote fashion item? How do they breed them? How do they kill them?
Fur farms are one of the worst cruelties, I believe, of the many that animals face. I've been outside of fur farms. I've never been inside one, but my friend, Malcolm Klimowitz, has been inside. He's filmed. He's been to court. His evidence has been played out in court, obviously. I've also done research for the campaigns that I've been involved with. So I've seen mink. I've seen Asiatic raccoon dog, foxes. My friend Joanne MacArthur has been inside and photographed. I've used her images. And what we see is animals whose innate natural behavior is digging, is roaming in the wilderness, is swimming, confined in filthy small wire cages where they go absolutely crazy, turning around, what's it, zoocosis or something, the behaviors that they exhibit, that they're eating each other, cannibalism, they're coming down with disease, they're suffering, that the food is slocked on top of the wire. It falls to the bottom, their feces fall to the bottom. You see, as you walk along, you see maggots, you see flies, you see rats, and the animals that are existing for their short, air quote, growing season in these conditions. When their time comes to an end, they're grabbed violently from the cage. The killing methods are, you can look it up online. You search video. There's a fox that you can watch online being grabbed, anally electrocuted. And I'm pausing because we need to take in how these animals suffer just for a mere faction item. Another method of killing is mink might be forced into a box full of gas. And, I've seen so many images. I've heard people, the Real Fur film that Taimur Chowdhury has produced. In his film, he has a worker that I've met. He came to a premiere in Toronto, and he is just devastated at how he killed so many and what he witnessed himself. He has autism, and his emotions are raw when he describes. So, the videos I've seen in Asia, of Asiatic raccoon dog as well, they're just like, their little paws, and their little paws are reaching out of the cages. And in those situations, they're grabbed violently from the cages, and they're just bashed over the head. And people in Canada are wearing these animals as trim on coats. So one of the things um, I developed was a program called Zip Off the Cruelty. And it was intended for people wearing, for example, Canada Goose. And we succeeded with many organizations and people in many countries supporting these campaigns, like PETA. We did home visits of Danny Rees, the CEO of Canada Goose. And we were relentless in our campaigning against Canada Goose. And we had a success. We really had a success where Canada Goose now is not using any new fur. I mean, it's still really frustrating if you go into a store and they're still trying to sell off the old stock. So there's still fur in stores. But on the streets, we have cards that talk about the horrors, really simple cards, business card size. I really recommend people start campaigning with business cards. And it describes the horrors, and we give the card to people on the streets. We've had, you can look online, Zip Off the Cruelty. We've had many successes now of people actually on the street zipping off this awful, awful product, which is, an absolute animal torture. And the Zip Off the Cruelty campaign is kind of ballooned into through Animal Rights Toronto as well. Myself, having emails every week. I have a drop box outside the house, and people drop off fur, and it's kind of mushroomed into so many big real fur coats coming my way. Recently, I was going through paperwork, and Peter is sending me, thank you for your donation of dozens of fur coats and real fur stoles. I've kind of exhausted the recipients in Canada of wildlife facilities. I have really cute videos of animals in rehab centers being comforted by the real fur. So I've taken like a ton of fur to wildlife rehabilitators, including one of them is Procyon Wildlife. And I take a donation at the same time. I reassure them that it's a one-time use. I would love help on this. If any wildlife rehabs would like more fur, or people want to contact their local rehab facility and say, please take the fur, because the COVID pandemic kind of shut down supply chains. Coats for Cubs was another one in the USA that we would take fur down to. It's a massive problem. Even I've been contacted by, little old ladies who say, yes, I have fur in my closet. I would never wear it now. Gradually, fur is becoming an item of shame. And it needs to be. It needs to be an absolute shame. And I will still I see women on the streets, men on the streets wearing fur. And yes, if they don't show remorse and shame and realize who they're wearing, then I will have a shouting match on the streets. And I encourage anyone to do that. Start off in a friendly way. Say, did you realize? And sometimes people won't realize. You know, there's so many ways to tell if it's real fur. The best method I use now is to say, well, if it comes to a point at the end, each individual strand, that is real fur. There's, at the moment, there's no manufacturing process that allows that, for each individual strand to come to a point. So, yeah, I mean, you've got me on a rant here. But identifying and letting people know about real fur is absolutely a massive campaign that I will never leave. Fur Free Toronto. We do great work here in Toronto, and End Fur Farming Ontario, the Fur Bearer Defenders in Canada, BC End Fur Farming. There's so many campaigning organizations now, and we need to never give it up because it's a long-term thing. A lot of campaigns are so long-term. If you give up, then fur can make a return because there's so many companies trying to make profit out of the suffering of animals. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's all important. All of that is very important. We are leaning into the fact that there is some shift in some mainstream rejection of fur that we're seeing now. And our hope is to see an end of the fur industry in our lifetime. Certainly, it's possible. I sounds like you agree with that, but just to go back for a moment, because we know the parts of what you just shared are hard for some people to hear, and we want folks to hang in there and hear them anyway and not click away because the instinct might be, I don't want to listen to this. But we really want to encourage people to listen so that you can, not shy away from the details of the cruelty of these animals that they're going through right now. And the confinement alone is so cruel. And then adding on top of that, the treatment and then the cruel killing of animals in fur farm. And if you imagine switching your dog or cat into that situation,
Right.
it's unimaginable.
And it's interesting. We have like abolitionist or welfarist, and you can actually point to welfare concerns in Europe closing down fur farms because the animals could not have their natural behaviors. They could not dig in the soil. They could not swim. And it was too expensive to actually make these natural behaviors, come to fruition. So activists were able to use welfare concerns to actually close down a fur farm. So I would also say never discount. You want an industry to end, but there are various methods that you can utilize to actually make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just highlight sort of the call to action that you mentioned about wildlife rehabbers, that one thing to inspire activists to do is to look locally for their wildlife rehabbers and do what you've done, which is so, going from death to life, right? Going from the death of the unfortunate, unreturnable death of an animal to bringing it to a young animal or an animal, a wild animal who is suffering or needs rehabilitation, and doing something good, with that.
Right.
Is
Exactly.
wonderful.
Exactly. And then on the street, a lot of people will say, well, I've got it now. What am I supposed to do? And then you say, well, you know what? You take it off, we donate it to a wildlife rehab, and then something good comes of it. It's so bizarre. I've even been given fake fur trim. So last year when fur season came along, I had a ton of fake fur trim. And then I was able to do a swap in the street. I took a real fur from someone and I gave a piece of fake fur because, a lot of times people are not even comfortable wearing fake fur because it actually promotes the wearing, I feel. I mean, you can't do anything about it now. Fake fur is everywhere. But when someone has a piece of realistic looking fake fur trim on their coat, it can encourage the use of real fur because people sometimes won't know the difference.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well, and I'm in total agreement with that. And in 2024, as we sit, of course, the technology is available to make fake fur, and they are, and you can't really tell the difference unless you learn about what the difference is. And so that would be the concern. Although we would rather everyone wear fake fur than real fur, the optics of it continue to normalize the wearing of a skin because it looks like skin, it looks like fur. So it just perpetuates that continuation of like, this is okay, this is a thing.
Right. But
Oh,
I don't, I mean, way back in the UK, we had a leaflet that one of the organizations produced against wearing fake fur, but now it's everywhere. So I don't campaign, I don't criticize people who choose to wear fake fur. Um, on occasion, um, I've approached someone, and this is actually why you need to approach people in a friendly manner initially, because even a lot of activists here won't recognize the difference between fake fur and real fur. So you can't be screaming at someone in the street if you think that they're wearing real fur trim, because oftentimes it could be fake fur, and this is why you have to get up close. You have to kind of train yourself in the way fur moves. Even now, fake fur moves in the wind. You just can't use that, I don't think. You need to get up close and you need to, "Well, do you mind? Can I take a look?" And then you have a conversation about it initially. And then the question arises, oftentimes you realize this is real fur. And then, unfortunately, even people in stores will be selling what they think is fake fur and it's actually real fur. And the myth that real fur is expensive now, I mean, it's not expensive anymore. Yeah, there's massive farms that produce fur. You might be wearing real fur and you might think, "Oh, this coat was only cheap." That has nothing to do with it.
right. And I think I even read, I don't know if it was PETA where I read this, but sometimes they mingle dog and cat fur. Some countries do with the
I don't.
others.
I know. I think what that is referring to is that yes, dog and cat fur will be used on trim. It's not as though they mingle it. That would be too hard. But for sure, um, cat and dog fur is used, and labeling laws. A lot of times, I think things. There was a coat in Canada recently. Said vegan. And yeah, part of it was fake fur, but I could have sworn, the rest of it was false. And yet the person in the store just wouldn't believe me. And really, the temptation was to buy the damn coat, send it off for testing. Um, I mean, I didn't do that, but mislabeling happens all the time. So you have to be ever so careful when you're approaching people or when you're, considering purchasing a coat.
Well, we want people to not buy it at all because of that. If you can't tell the difference, don't take the chance, and don't take our word for it. Of course, go ahead and Google. After you listen to this, go ahead and Google how to tell the difference, or Google for Jenny's video where she talks about it. I've seen that. It's very good. So you explain how to tell the difference and become an expert in telling the difference. But let's switch from fur to a different topic then, and we'll talk a little bit about activism, and sometimes the result of powerful, compelling, activism is getting arrested. Something you might be a little bit familiar with, I think. So let's talk about whatever you can talk about in regard to getting arrested and going to trial. Define civil disobedience, and what you can say about the experiences you've had generally and some specific examples. How many times have you been arrested, and what is it like each time is different. What stands out about that for you, and why? Why sometimes actors will allow themselves or know, eyes wide open, they're going into a situation where they may be arrested and they go forward anyway. And it's not necessarily about avoiding that, although avoiding it is ideal. Why does it make a powerful statement?
Being arrested should never be the actual goal, in my opinion, um, because the process is uncomfortable, um, sometimes violent, uh, tedious, expensive, honestly. But saying all that, um, I've actually been arrested 10 times now. It's now in the double digits. Um, and raising awareness for animals is part of civil disobedience. And I will sometimes use the example way back, the women's suffragettes, they wanted to vote and they would throw themselves in situations, they would chain themselves, they would then be arrested. That is the only like social justice movement I will ever use as a comparison, honestly. And it does work in raising public awareness. Lawyers will disagree on whether it actually moves the needle forward in terms of making a difference to animals' rights in the long term. Uh, the legal system is difficult to navigate. I'm currently facing, I don't know, maybe 6 criminal charges altogether in 2 different cases right now. I am a criminal. I kind of laugh because it's in a way it's ludicrous in a way. Um, I thought I was lucky for about a decade. I was being arrested and charges were being dropped, and quite serious charges initially. I was involved in open rescue way back. Well, when I say way back, like 2018, 2019, with a team with Direct Action Everywhere. We went inside a pig. I mean, people call them farms. Honestly, they're factories. Small family farms are literally factories of cruelty and suffering, um, and death, and disease. And we rescued piglets, and it's a civil disobedience where you're going in, you're breaking laws, obviously. But the outcome of open rescue is just so heartwarming. You're actually making a difference in an animal's life. You're shining a light into an absolute story of horror. And by doing that, then by getting media, mainstream media, social media, you're raising awareness in such a different way. Open rescue, you have your face visible. You're not ashamed of what you're doing. Some people will criticize it, saying, going in and rescuing as many animals as you can. ALF style is the way to do it. I've not done that personally. For the most part, I believe in doing these things, confidently and making a difference in an animal's life. For open rescue, you need to have really good contacts in the sanctuary world, or the world of people caring for animals. You really need to have a plan. You can't just go in and take an animal and not have a plan. You need to have access to vet care. There's so many issues, but yeah, open rescue is my air quote favorite arrest because industry is put on notice that we are here. We are confident in exposing you, and we are making a difference in an animal's life. For open rescue, the charges were dropped, and you can Google pig trial, Jenny McQueen, and you look at animal publications, industry publications. We drive them nuts, which is a good thing. And as an aside, Direct Action is getting political now, and in Berkeley, they have succeeded in banning CAFOs in Berkeley. Now, how that will look, going forward, I don't know. Fox hunting was banned many years ago in the UK, but still persists. So it's a difficult thing. But yeah, going back to the arrests, let's see. I've been arrested for going onto the field of play in baseball and basketball. I've been arrested for blocking bridges with Extinction Rebellion and Animal Rebellion. I've been arrested for agricultural shows, going onto the inside where they were showing cows. I've been arrested in the UK for going inside Canada Goose store and trying to close down a slaughterhouse. A group of us were outside until workers violently pulled us apart and police intervened. More recently, I was arrested for a breach of a previous court order for going inside a Canadian National Exhibition where hopefully my lawyer at the moment, Gary Grill, amazing lawyer, animal rights, vegan, he will blast that perception that, that show is an agricultural show. And then just recently I was arrested for going onto the court of play at the Raptors game, which is our basketball game. And the most recent arrest, a couple of these times, it's almost been a miracle where, conditions, like a team of us went and we disrupted the Blue Jays. And we weren't sure how to do it, there was a big banner I had around my waist underneath clothing. We don't wear animal rights clothing. We went down to the game. The place was full, screaming fans, and there's 4 seats just empty, right up there next to us. And a miracle as well with the latest arrest. When I decide to go down again, I have a banner, down my jeans, ready to go. And then I walk next to behind the basketball net, and it's a clear path through, So you take these opportunities when you're doing civil disobedience. You hope that everything is going to be successful. I mean, I was gifted tickets that morning. I didn't know I was doing it the day before the latest arrest, and the issue that I was going for this time was the live export of horses to Japan from Canada. And to me, yes, I know I'm going to be arrested. If I get onto the court of play, it's generally mischief, hopefully nothing, which sounds funny, but it is criminal. But you take the opportunity because what you're doing is it's extremely serious issues. We can laugh about arrests, and we take that personal risk of losing our freedom. I've been in handcuffs so many times now, and I've been in police holding cells. But what I'm aiming to do is bring awareness for such serious issues, such awful animal suffering, and to me, honestly, it's worth it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just thinking. Radical change requires radical action, but still, it's worth saying to you, and I'm sure you hear this a lot, you are brave. Not everybody would feel that they have that constitution or whatever. Not that you probably see yourself as maybe no more brave than anybody else, and your focus is on the animals, yet I'm sure a lot of people who are hearing this are saying, "Oh my gosh, I can never do this." But you probably thought that at one time, and that you couldn't have done it, and yet the first time you do it leads to the next time, leads to the next time, and especially if you see where you are raising awareness and it is, making some difference. So the thoughts I was having as you were sharing around, sort of laying out the timeline a little bit, kind of your arrests, and I was wondering how many arrests did lead to going to trial, how many sort of generally were dropped, and I was also thinking about the PETA is so famous for their runway disruptions.
Hmm.
I heard Ingrid speak recently. She did a talk I got to meet her in person near where I am. And she was saying, you know, they don't know how we do it. Like, they don't know, they don't know how to block us. Like, they don't know when we're going to show up and how we get in. But she was saying, we get in and to this day, even after so many times, it can, and I know I'm saying that because you also showed up on the runway, I believe, right? So I don't know if you want to share anything about what that was like.
Yeah, honestly, and that was one of my favorite disruptions. That was against fur being used. Um, and you just make yourself look completely normal. You dress up, you buy a ticket, um, you kind of place yourself in that situation where you suddenly are, you hide your banner or your sign, and then you just kind of sit and wait for the opportunity. And Ingrid is right. They don't know when to expect us, and we actually need more people to do that type of thing. My friends in New York, a big shout out to Rachel, who enabled a couple of activists to do that in New York for Coach and for Leather. But it's a good feeling, and to actually get up there. I was on my own in that runway. It was a Toronto fashion show, and I was on my own, and I was thinking, oh no, I couldn't get anyone else in. It was either they weren't comfortable doing that, or pretty much that. Actually, there was a team on the outside, but I was thinking, oh no, I'm without a photographer, without a videographer. But then, the press are in there, and it gets out, or the public are in there and they film. So even if you're doing things on your own, it gets out generally, if you're in a big public situation. And there I am on the catwalk, walking along with the music behind, the male model with a massive sign that I'd folded it into my bag. That, you make sure your sign is the right way up. There's some really basic things. And yes, that was not an arrest. So there's quite a few disruptions that I've done which didn't end up with an arrest or any charge. You sometimes will just get ejected from whatever situation you're in. You might be roughly handled. But again, it's raising awareness in such an effective way. I need to say, though, when you say that people aren't brave, so many people are brave in the activism that they do. Whether it's yourself or right now we're doing the podcast, you're putting your own voice out there, whether you're cooking for friends and you're bringing along vegan food, whether you're leafleting in the streets, everything is a form of bravery. Disrupting is something that I'm okay with doing, and being arrested is something that I'm not okay with because it still feels bizarre, but it's something that I've experienced. So I never discount any form of activism. That is really essential for me to say.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make, that we need every activist, and don't feel you have to be Jenny McQueen, of course, or do the most, whatever people may consider the boldest forms or the most intense or the most sensational kinds of forms that get that level of attention. Whatever you're doing, it certainly all adds up. And I wanted to back up because I said Ingrid, but I don't know. I want to make sure everybody knows who we're referring to. We're referring to Ingrid Newkirk. She's the founder and president of PETA. So everybody can kind of go look her up. But you're right. You are a good example for coming out of your comfort zone and being happy to do it, as I am, because of the cause, because of the why, because of the reason. It is nothing in the same stratosphere of what the animals are going through, the discomfort that we may go through coming out of our comfort zone. So as we're sort of speaking to activists right now, which is generally our audience with this podcast, is there anything else that you want activists to know about getting arrested? And how do we support, how can we as a community better support activists who do get arrested?
Yeah. And the one really fun, not fun thing of being arrested is you have to you have to kind of lose your anger during the process, because you can, and frustration, you could be waiting um, hours. The arrest in the summer, I was had my hands handcuffed behind my back. It's really uncomfortable, and I was in a police car that was really hot. One interesting thing, one kind of fun thing is, I don't believe in staying silent, but you have to really control what you say. So in the back of the police car, I'm chatting to the two cops, um, and I'm telling them about the Game Changers movie, and I'm telling them about, why love one, but eat the other. And in the end, after they realize that, I can string two sentences together, I'm not just an angry person, then, they were showing me their dogs. They were getting their phones out and showing me their dogs. And then one cop was explaining the Game Changers to the other cop. A lot of police have actually seen that. So I will campaign for animals during the whole process. And I really believe in doing that, as long as you're extremely careful and you don't give out any information that could, influence you, because you're always being filmed, you're always being recorded. So I will always be saying, to the officer in the who's taking your photograph, who's taking your fingerprints, I will be campaigning for them as well. I will be giving cards to them as much as I can. And one thing for activists to know is, when you're in police holding cell, you have no idea of the time. It's just like an animal being confined, honestly. You're down to that kind of situation. You don't know when you're going to be let out. You can't see, oftentimes. There's no sunlight, no daylight. The control is taken away. You have no privacy. You can hear the screaming of people who have been arrested, in cells next to you. Last time, I was hearing, someone who was extremely upset, who sounded as though they had mental issues. They were guys next to me, and I didn't say a peep, because I thought, I don't want guys knowing there's a woman in a cell next to them. So it's extremely unpleasant. It's not, after the excitement, let's air quote, excitement of the arrest, then it's not at all fun to be in a holding cell.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of leave your anger behind, in a way, because what good is it going to do? One time I was in a holding cell with other people. We'd been arrested as a group, and you're seeing someone really suffer. Part of the group, it was a 70-year-old lady. She was on a concrete bench. She was feeling ill, and the police had no sympathy. They treat you like a common criminal. They have no distinction. If you're getting arrested for a cause, they oftentimes have no distinction as you're doing anything, for a social justice issue. So, yeah.
Mm,
Do not lose your sanity inside a police holding cell. It's not fun at all.
no. Yeah. And again, 'cause so many things, go back to just being able to regulate your emotions. We already feel so much anger because of what's happening to the animals. And then on top of that, it feels so unfair to be treated the way we're treated when we're really just trying to help. And the irony is just doesn't go unnoticed by people. We're trying to bring more kindness in, and yet here we are. I want to repeat your sort of tip, I guess, around that, which is to manage your anger, and also keep in mind that anything you say can and will be used against you. But at the same time, look for those opportunities. Be aware of those opportunities to educate and outreach calmly, maybe factually, with the folks who are handling you during that arrest, from the beginning to the end. And one thing we can do for activists who go through that is to check in on them afterwards or during, if we can, and lend emotional support and any other support. Let's not forget them. Let's not let them drop off our radar screen. And then I was also thinking to remind people not to resist arrest, you would say as well, right? Because that could be an additional charge.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's important.
Like, what's the point that they've got you at that point? And there's basically cameras everywhere, and they would recognize you afterwards. So, I mean, I've been phoned by the police. You look at your phone and there's, detective something. So there's basically no getting away. Even you think you might get away, but it'll be really unusual to be able to get away from something. So what's the point?
Make it worse.
Yeah, you just, in a way, your own mental health is at danger. If you resist too much, if you let your anger get away from you, then you can be charged with assaulting a police officer. So that's really serious. And then for the animals, honestly, there's no benefit.
Okay. That's all really good and important, practical, pragmatic advice and good reminders. So because of what you're saying and presenting all these examples of what could happen, it's still rare. It's still the exception. Animal rights activism is peaceful, is meant to be peaceful and nonviolent because we're illustrating that that's our goal, to have more of nonviolence in the world. Even
Yeah.
though we get very aggressive, so to speak, but the general public narrative, or the story that the public may see us through, they describe, and we come across this when we're outreaching the public, right? Describes animal rights activism as too extreme sometimes, quote, or too militant. So how do you sort of personally respond to that? What's your, what do you say when someone says that?
Oh, it's very frustrating. Um, I would be the person, I guess, that would be described as militant, as extreme, but um, I don't feel that I am at all. I'm peaceful. Um, yes, I get frustrated when I'm doing street activism. Yes, I might shout shame at someone, after I've tried the friendly approach. But surely, if a human was confined in such a way, um, as an animal, if they could put themselves in that position, wouldn't they want someone to be extreme for them? Wouldn't they want someone to be militant for them? And to me, as long as I've never thrown a punch at anyone. I've always tried to mediate. If I see emotions becoming too high on the streets, I'll get in between people. Um, then I don't believe in aggression, just personally. Um, but yes, it's almost like bring it on. If you feel that we're being extreme, bring it on. There's part of me that, is standing up against that and saying, yeah, we're extreme. You'd want us to be extreme. And then the other part of me is saying, you know what? We're just normal people as well. And, we have lives. We enjoy nature. We enjoy um, eating ours. We're just normal people.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of those strange things that we can't really fight too much against, but at the same time, we could lead by example.
Exactly. And maybe, and it is certainly appropriate sometimes to just sort of own that. Yes. And I am. Yes. And you always hear, the different signs that we hold often will say, if you were in that truck, if you were in that cage, if you were on that fur farm, I'd be fighting for you too. And wouldn't you want someone to fight for you? And so sort of trying to engage their empathy is the way to go with that. Because again, it's just one of those ways that people will use to distract and excuse and justify and all of those. Um, not
Yeah, exactly. And there is such violence against activists. I mean, let's be clear. Um, when you're thinking about people, in different nations, in like South America, environmental activists are basically, they're shot, they're beaten. So we have, so much to cope with. I'm totally privileged here in Canada. I totally get that. So people are really struggling when they speak out, whether it be human issues or whether it be, animal issues.
Yeah. So, sort of speaking of that, because you've been an activist a long time, as you said, since the 90s. So, you have a particular perspective just because of the length of time you've been involved in this movement. What sort of personally keeps you going? And maybe there's some tips in there. How do you prevent burnout? What are the biggest changes or progress you've witnessed since this sort of, I don't know if there's an official, people will often say the 70s, I guess it was sort of quote unquote the official start of the animal rights movement,
Mhm.
maybe. Um, yeah. So how do you keep going?
Oh, I kind of protect myself in a way. Um, I don't look at the worst. Um, like people are posting torture videos. Um, I don't. I try and protect people that I post to as well. I try not to post the worst abuses, and especially when we can't do anything about it. I find activism actually gives me a boost. So, I volunteer with, for example, We the Free, Anonymous for the Voiceless, um, and so many other organizations, Free Toronto, Direct Action Everywhere. And being involved with other organizations, you have that community feel that really helps. You can either, be boosted by someone else, or you can help boost and soothe other people's emotions. Yeah, doing street activism helps me. Speaking to the public, yes, it can be frustrating, but oftentimes you'll see that spark of realization go on, in someone's eyes, and then you feel as though you're really making a difference. Um, Finding good vegan food, being out in nature, sitting in nature just quietly, just going for a walk in the neighborhood, listening to music. There's so many ways, and honestly, if you feel as though you can make a difference in life in the smallest way for animals, for comrades in the movement, then hopefully that will give people a boost too. And people, I never feel if people are taking a step back, I'm never critical of them. My hope is that they will come back to activism. I try not to be critical either of quiet vegans. They're still vegan and they're still making a difference, in their family just by example. So, trying not to be critical of other people is really key. And um, I do have haters as well, people who will call out my form of activism or the way I do things. I try and defend myself, but then block. The block button is really useful at times too. When you can't get through to people, when you're really getting criticized, then don't take too much criticism. Use the block function, but maybe ask others to defend yourself a little bit. I'm past that stage where I reach out to others and say, you know, um, I need support. I generally defend myself, but I try and take responsibility as well if I'm doing something which is really, not gelling with people. I don't know. There's so many ways you can try and support yourself and reach out to others if you feel the need. Do activism if it gives you that boost. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with a balance of both of those. And, we always say self care is important. And sometimes that means solitary time and engaging in your own personal practices that nourish you. And then
Hmm.
also community is so important as well. Um, and reminding you that you're never obligated to engage in haters,
Right.
in negators. You're there's no there's no, obligation to engage. You cannot engage. And sometimes that is actually the best approach, not to engage.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be. Give it a go, but then give it up. Because sometimes, I mean, you can go on a back and forth with someone, on, for example, social media, and you can see that you're not getting through to them. So what's the point? I mean, sometimes I will say, okay, this is my last reply, and I will make that clear. I'm not going to engage further. Or, if you see something really awful on your own post, you have the power to delete. And I will often say, I'll sometimes private message someone saying, you know what? I don't accept that type of comments, and I'm going to delete it. I will give warning, or I will give public warning. I'm just going to delete that. I'll give it a minute or so. And you've got the delete button, or you've got the block button too. So don't try not to accept too much abuse, because especially from fellow activists, it can be extremely hurtful. And you have to work through that sometimes. Also take ownership if you've done something, or if someone is perceived that you've done something, take ownership and try and don't get too defensive.
Yeah. So what a world we live in, where words have really become weapons, but on the other side of that, words are powerful when used as upliftment and education as well. So we've talked a bit about your past campaigns and historically in the Jenny McQueen activist story. Let's catch up to you now and talk about one of your at least current campaigns. There is a coordinated effort among many grassroots groups internationally to get foie gras dropped from restaurants and hotels and have it banned, fingers crossed, right, in cities, even countries, because that's been done. And I don't know if you organized it or participated recently in the Omni Hotel demos and protests. There's been lots of victories. How do you feel about the victories? You feel good? What does that make you think? And sort of tell us a little bit about foie gras, why we're focusing on foie gras right now as a movement.
I think it's essential to have some wins, for fellow activists, for the movement, for the public perception. And the foie gras campaign is fantastic. So we have local, international activists here as well. Shout out to David Magna in Toronto.
I just interviewed him. I think you know that.
I watched that. He's amazing.
So good.
The 40-year-old vegan on Instagram, if you want to follow him.
I'll look it up.
Yes. So he went down animal activism mentorship, and we joined that campaign, and we have community meetings here called AR chats, and we try and do an action after each. We actually do them at a really good community hub called Wishbone Animal Rights Center. Shout out to Sue Spar for creating that. And so again, we didn't really know that we were going to do that action the day before, but it's easy to, make some signs, get some markers, get some dollar store card, make a sign. And we crashed a really fancy hotel in Toronto and spoke out for geese being force-fed. And even if you feel as though you're not making a difference, at the venue, because the venue could fight back, they could, just eject you really quickly. You make sure you have, tips for activism. You make sure you have a videographer with you. You make sure you have photographs, really good photographs. And then, if it's media worthy, you send to the media, post on social media. You find other organizations such as AAM, which are making a difference and which are bringing together people internationally. And you join with that campaign, and then together, pressure campaigns make a big difference. And especially when people are doing it in other countries, you're feeling then part of a huge wider community. You're bringing in wins, which then motivate and inspire other activists. And yay, yay for AAM, and yay for activism, on the street activism, grassroots activism, which is really making a difference. So thank you. Thank you for spearheading that campaign. And yeah, David has had another activist, Mike, using AI, do a scan of restaurants and places in Toronto that are selling foie gras. And we're, willing and able to join that campaign and to make that a bigger campaign in Toronto.
So many have dropped foie gras already, and it does, street activism does work. So that, and as you said, we need these wins and these victories to keep us going. And for those unfamiliar about what foie gras is, we don't have to get into it too much, but it's a French delicacy made from the liver of a duck or goose who has been fattened through force feeding until their liver is diseased. And it's extremely cruel. Do you want to say anything? I don't know if you know any more about foie gras, the industry, what that looks like, how that's done.
Yeah, in Canada, a lot of times, a restaurant will say, "Well, you know what? Look at the source of our foie gras," and they're kind of free range, and they're just like fed willingly, which is one reason why it's not all about the welfare, because some will say that they're not force fed. And maybe that's true. This is why we need to be thinking about the abolition of why are we still eating an animal's liver? Why are we still eating animal protein? Why are we still doing this? Why are we considering animals as food? That is really important to remember as well. It's like going on to another subject, like the use of down within coats, which is animal feathers. A lot of times it's from an industry that doesn't live pluck, for example. So knowing what happens to animals exactly in the foie gras industry, know your facts, try and get to know the sources of where people are, restaurants are sourcing animals from, and then be able to speak about, okay, maybe they're not being force fed in that particular area of Quebec. I did look into that one time, but why are we still using animal products? It's disgusting. Yeah. And a lot of times they are being force fed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Know the industry, know the horrors.
Yeah, it's greenwashing, right? Greenwashing or humane washing, right? When people will bring that up, and none of it is okay, and that's what our ultimate goal, of course, is complete abolitionism, complete liberation, complete emancipation of animals, so they're never thought of as any. So they're thought of as someone, not something, to be used and exploited and abused.
Exactly.
So I know that you are a lover of nature, and again, there's all of this intersection. The Earth itself, the animals, and us. But there's no even animals and us. We'd like to think there's non-human animals and human animals, right? We are one. We're sharing. We're earthlings who share this earth. But it makes me very sad personally to see what's happening to our natural world. It seems like every part of nature seems to be getting ruined by humans. Our footprint is just larger and larger all the time. Is there anything in particular that stands out for you, that troubles you about the environment, what's happening to the environment and nature currently?
Oh my God, there's so much. Honestly, so much. Um, when you look at the bigger picture, when you look at the fishing industry, the way they're trawling along the bottom, they're destroying the ocean, they're destroying, shark finning. Oh my God, the acidification of the oceans, the warming of the oceans, because the industry of animal agriculture, it's deforestation, so much, honestly.
Yeah.
Even just you take a ride in Ontario, in Canada, and you don't see the wildlife. You know that the wildlife is being hunted. This Yeah, it's really, really tough. And a lot of times people will say, "Oh, campaign for the animals," but we do need to reach people who campaign for the environment. We do need to reach them with the animal rights message too. It's really essential, it's easy to criticize. For example, people like Greenpeace. It's so easy to criticize them, saying they're not pushing the vegan message enough. But when you look back, they have had campaigns against animal agriculture. I remember way back, they had, a blood spattered a leaflet all about animal agriculture and its impact on the environment. So connect with environmental organizations, try and work within them. It's called, in a way, it's called intersectionality. It's like that is a bit of a buzzword right now, but connect with other organizations and try and persuade them and support them in their advocacy work too. And then take the wins when they're talking about how animals, their homes are being impacted. Yeah, it's absolutely so disturbing. And to also take heart in some of the good news. I mean, some of these there's big areas that are being protected in the world. There's big marine ecosystems that are being protected. There's forests and nature preserves that are being protected. Go and visit a sanctuary for animals. Go and support. Make monthly donations to a lot of these organizations that are trying to support the environment and who are trying to protect animals.
Great. So, I mean, one of my final questions is to connect the dots between animals and the environment and veganism. And I want to remind folks that veganism is a mindset that rejects the belief that non-human animals exist to be used by humans. So, why do you think a good place to start for anyone is going vegan?
Oh, absolutely. I always promote things like Challenge 22, which is a great resource, has dietitians, has all the nutrition information, has recipes. And, I let's grab my little card, activism kind of 101, have a card with lots of resources and personally. If you need a campaign to get yourself vegan, Veganuary is coming up. That is something, I door dropped last year in my own neighborhood. I took the leaflets from Veganuary. You have colorful foods. If you're thinking, go and veganize your favorite recipes, we have the internet, put color on your plate, you'll get all the nutrients, so unlikely that you'll get any protein deficient lifestyle. Protein is everywhere. Honestly, try and be vegan for the animals, though. Remind yourself about the animals every time. If you're tempted to have a bite of animal, the smell of animal cooking, if you're tempted, picture the chicken that has been rescued. Picture their beautiful, quirky little personality to stop you from being tempted to go back to that lifestyle. Explore all the meat alternatives. I chow down on Beyond Burgers. I'm excited by cell-based cultures. I will never eat anything that is sourced from an animal, even if it's a cell. To me, that's still not right. But promote that to the public. Honestly, it's so easy. If you live in a privileged country, if you have supermarkets, the privileged population, there's no excuse for them not to be vegan. I draw the line at people in other countries who are disadvantaged, who don't have easy access. We're not going to have the whole world be vegan right now. But honestly, you're talking to people in the city, there's no excuse. There's just no excuse not to be vegan. And if you do it for the animals, then that is your reminder. Oh, I won't criticize people who do it for the health, but at the same time, it's easier for them to think about, oh, this nutrition, that latest fad. So remind yourself about what the animals are going through.
Come on, folks, make the connection. Go vegan for the animals. It's all part of this conversation about animals
Yeah.
and having a better world for them that we've been having. And you remind me to tell people to watch the documentaries. There are so many, like Dominion, What the Health, Game Changers, Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy. Those are just the ones, at the top of my mind. So Jenny, we're going to wrap up now in a moment. Any final words from you, message of hope or a message to the next generation of activists, anything?
Yeah. I often get criticized for, not caring enough about humans and posting about human tragedies. But we can care about more than one issue at a time. And even if you're not publicly posting about what's going on in the world, people who care about animals, we care about humans too. We care about human suffering. And we're heartbroken about what's going on in the human world, obviously. But don't give up being campaigning for animals. Please don't give up. Push that too. That's all I'm saying. The heart is big enough to care about so many issues. Don't forget about the animals. Be vegan for the animals. Campaign for the animals. In amongst whatever campaigning you're doing, and your heart tells you to, and your morals and your ethics tell you to, and what's right in the world. Just hold on to that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So as we wrap up, you need to know that I admire you so much as a fierce, unstoppable advocate for animals, a true warrior of justice. You are leaving a long-lasting impact on animals and humans and the world. So thank you so much. And thank you for spending your time with me here on the Animal Liberation Hour.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And honestly, right back at you. The work you're doing, honestly, you're putting yourself out there too. And so much respect and gratitude for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening. Please rate and review the podcast so others can find us and be inspired by our guests and topics. If you enjoy the Animal Liberation Hour and would like to support our work, please consider joining AAC's Patreon. Even as little as $2 a month goes a long way in helping us expand our reach and increase our impact. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, where you can keep up with the podcast as well as everything AAC. One more reminder that you can sign up for a free mentor to help you with your activism at animalactivismmentorship.com. Our work extends beyond mentorship to include collaborations and mutual support with other grassroots animal rights groups. So reach out to us to become part of the AAC community. If you've been waiting for the right time to get active for the animals, this is it. Their need is urgent right now. Remember that it will take all of us to achieve animal liberation, so stay focused, remain optimistic, be effective, and keep doing your part. Until next time, this is AAC signing off.